played soccer with some of the people at the church in that picture there. That was really fun. We're some and we won, actually. Surprisingly. I think Diego carried us, to be honest, but yeah.
So for 2 days, we helped to build the fence. It included helping to plant some of the first bamboo that was going to grow along the fence line to make the natural border for what they hope will be their future site of their church building. This is the same congregation that we were meeting with in the backyard at the pastor's house in a tent. They look forward with strong imagination, vision for the building that they're going to build on this site. That's a group of all the folks that were working together, largely moving rocks, like Lucas said, and preparing the space as best we could. And then after our wonderful time in Riobamba meeting church friends there and helping, we began our trip back to Quito with a stop in Salcedo, which is conveniently famous for ice cream, and some images of the space that we spent our night in Salcedo. Continuing our adventure back north to Quito, we also had the amazing opportunity to stay within a national park near Cotopaxi. And at this location, we were at significant altitude. And so some of the people in our group were experiencing what that's like. Some were brave and hiked to one of the peaks adjacent to Cotopaxi. There's a lot of volcanoes in Ecuador, and we experienced the amazement of that unique natural environment and all of its differences from Iowa.
So it was almost 13,000 feet that we were staying at, and when they hiked, they got to almost 14,000 feet. But Cotopaxi, the summit, is closer to 20,000 feet, so it's really high.
So while staying in the Cotopaxi National Park, a group like we said, we really took advantage. Very remote, first of all. It's no cell service for me anyway, and it helped to remind me of what life used to be like, where you are on your own. There was the hotel lodging area, the restaurant, and then the staff lodging area, and that was it. And the area was so beautiful. It looked like a green landscape of Mars, where you have rocks, I think in the picture behind. You had that, but it was foggy, but then the fog would lift sometimes. And I didn't realize that the peak, the active volcano, was right outside of our window until the next day, because it was just fogged in for the day before. But just such different beauty that you were surrounded. We were up in the mountains the entire time. In Quito, we went from 1,600 feet above sea level here in Iowa on average to over 8,000 feet in Quito, and then to Riobamba, which is over 9,000 feet above sea level, and then to Cotopaxi, which is about 12,500 where we were staying, and then hiking up to almost 14,000. It takes some adjustment, but you sort of acclimate yourself, drink lots of water, and just listen to your body. But it was very rewarding. The group in the upper left hand, we all went hiking during the day. Some of us went to a natural lake, hiked around the lake, and then the group of us, hardy souls, did about 1,700 feet elevation change. And it was a 2-hour hike up to the top, but it was, you felt it. And it just, the lack of breath that you have, it's hard, it gets hard. And some of you that have done the 14ers, your breath, you can't get a deep breath, but you still just put one foot in front of the other and doggedness or determination, what have you. But it's such a relief and such a feeling of accomplishment to get to the top or get to your ending destination. But it was a long day, it was a full day. Because then we went back into Quito at the end of the day and went to a national soccer match in the Olympic Stadium in Quito. And it was just an amazing occurrence. So many things that happened, coincidence or the spirit leading, but it was just a wonderful experience that day. This one day I'll remember.
So yeah, on the previous slide, so it was the Aucas versus Universidad de Católica, and we all became Aucas fans. So tell the story of the name. So, well, I mean, it's okay. So the Aucas is it's an indigenous community from the Amazon. It's actually, if you know the story of the end of the spear, some of you know that story from the 50s of a number of missionaries that went down and were actually killed by this indigenous tribe, and then through their conversion reconciled with the families of the survivors and had this kind of unique story. But this group, AUKUS, is actually a sort of like a derogatory term for this indigenous group, but they've sort of taken it on as a badge of honor, and so they use it and celebrate it. And so the crowd was extreme. Like, so if you've been to sporting events in the U.S., right? Like, we get loud and stuff. There's 30 to 40,000 people in a stadium or an arena. But here there was probably like maybe 2,000 people at most, maybe, and it was deafening. Like, they were screaming and cheering, and so it was a lot of fun, a lot of energy. But then so we reached sort of our final stop, which was at Quito Mennonite Church in Quito. And so we had been traveling and moving from hotel to hotel pretty often. So it's kind of nice to kind of get a base in Quito. And there, the first day, we were able to help with their MCC food distribution. So they have been participating for a number of years. With distributing food to refugees from all over the world. They are what is called an UNCR nation, a United Nations Commission of Humanitarian Relief or Refugees. So they receive refugees from places like the Ukraine and Syria and Afghanistan, but the majority come from Venezuela and Colombia. And so each month they distribute 60 bags of food and supplies to these families. And so you see they're distributing platanos, and then they had rice and sugar and other things that we packaged up. Oops. That's going the wrong way. Sorry. And then down here in the bottom left-hand corner, one of the things that the refugees could do is sign up for some of their classes. And so there was a limited number of spots, but they could choose to join in. And then the church, these women who run the program would teach and talk about violence, domestic violence. They would talk about different things that refugees face as they travel to a new country, and then taught about scripture and how they could find hope in through Jesus and through the church. And so then they fed us a lovely meal of fruit and bread, and we got to see a little bit of what they were doing. Later that afternoon, we had some free time and were able to do some shopping in town. And you saw the Aucas jersey. Well, we had to buy some souvenirs, to remember our time there. So. Okay, and then part of the group, so basically not Nathan and not me, but the rest of the group got to do a hop on, hop off bus tour through Quito. If you can imagine, like the Great British buses where you have the open air top on the top, and they got to go through Quito. They went to the marketplace in that center image. They went to the basilica, kind of in the bottom right, and through the old town in that top right corner, and then the Panacillo, which is an overlook where a statue of Mary is at the top, but you can see the whole city. And the city of Quito is a little bit interesting in that it's really long. It's super long. I'm trying to remember how many kilometers it was. 45? 45 miles? Or 45 kilometers? 45 kilometers, I think. But still significantly long. And at its narrowest, in some places, it's only a kilometer wide. And part of that is it's centered through a mountainous valley or region. And so you can kind of get a picture of that from this Panacillo. So they took in some of the sights. We ate a lot of good food, although the food is not, it's different, but it's not that different from what you might eat in the US, just prepared maybe slightly differently. While they were doing that, Nathan and I got to spend 10 hours in meetings, talking with the church from Quito. The folks there are they're the only church in their conference, but the conference's name is ICAME. You may have heard me talk about it before, but and so in these pictures, they were talking about some of the challenges that they face. They did a Bible study with Nathan Luchins, thinking about how do they work together and team together. And then the entire partnership and the Ikame Church were down here in the bottom. And so we ate together as well.
We were fortunate to be in Quito for the 20th anniversary of a congregation. This would be one of the congregations that Central Plains has had a long history of relationship with. When they did their slideshow set to music to celebrate their 20th anniversary, there were faces of people from Central Plains in the pictures that were in the slideshow celebrating the story of this church. Just another reminder of how deep and enduring this friendship that we have between Iowa and Ecuador is, that we're a part of their celebration. So we got to be there packed into this church building with clearly like people from the wide surrounding area. There were lots of special music selections, lots of choirs, dancing, singing, and just a chance to be immersed in the sounds of worship for them, the volume of worship, the style of worship. And I think it was really a special delight that our trip coincided with this celebration. Somebody enjoying the fact that there was a chicken foot in the soup that was passed out to them. But there were so many people that when it came the time to feed the crowd, everybody just stayed exactly where they were in their plastic chair. And the host brought food to everybody because there was no way for this group to like channel to another room and be fed. We stayed exactly where we were, and they brought food to us. And it was a deeply emotional and celebratory time for the people who had invested so much in the life of this congregation and were celebrating together. More images from that celebration. Joel Beachy even got compelled up to the stage for one of the moments of blessing for the congregation.
So typically in lots of different cultures, but like in a church setting, anybody that's a pastor, they'll say, okay, all the pastors come up. Well, I wasn't going to go up, but then one of the pastors from Riobamba who came up. So like Christine said, there was a number of the two churches from Riobamba came up and were celebrating with this church. Again, this would be one of the Ikme churches, which is the indigenous Mennonite church conference that Quito also relates to. So this other pastor said, "Oh no, we got to go up," and he's standing right beside me to my left, or to my right up there, but on the left. His name's Ramon, and I turned to him and I said, "What are we doing?" He said, "I have no idea. Never done it." And then they proceeded to pray for a bottle of oil and just filled our hands with oil. And then we just, both of us just kind of looked and watched everybody else. And then eventually what it was all the people gathered in front. Then they had us just like plop the oil on their heads and just sort of pray over them. So it was their, what they would call their deacons or their elders, and then and spouses and other leaders from the conference. And you can't tell from that picture, but I was just praying not to fall over at the time. So very sick. And then this is these are some images that Lucas had put together for his presentation. So the funny-faced guy is Diego Castro, who was a real. It was a pleasure to have him as part of our group. I think we would have anyway bonded together, but he helped to sort of instigate and create a camaraderie that we all really appreciated, to the point where, you know, these long van rides of 4 or 5, 6 hours, you know, we're singing and teasing each other and having a good time. So one of the byproducts of doing a trip like this, especially across the conference, is that, you know, we got to know this Hillary Lee in the middle, Diego Castro, and then got to know each other better, you know, seeing W in a different context, seeing Nathan and his 2 boys in a different context. So we're excited. This was our first learning service trip in about 5 or 6 years. I think it was before COVID. Holly Blosser Yoder from West Union was the Ecuador Partnership Coordinator before me. And so I think she participated in at least one trip with folks, but we're hoping that we can recreate this again next year and the following year. So we have some of the structure is laid out now, kind of how to pull this off and sort of the pricing, and the churches that we served are very eager for us to return. So they would love for us to do more building projects for them and continue to work. But yeah, it was a very great experience. Another highlight for me, I did make it into the picture. I did not participate in the whole meetings because, again, I was ill towards the end of this trip. But this is a historic picture. It may not seem like it, but it is. So represented here, Peter on the left is the Mennonite Mission Network worker that we support. He is considered the Ecuador Partnership Coordinator for Ecuador, along with his wife Delicia. Beside him, or maybe I'll start over here. Here is Manuel Guanaba, I think. No, Guanabana. No, sorry, I forget his last name, but he was the church or pastor at the church where we celebrated the 20 years. He would be the representative from ICME, which is the Indigenous Mennonite Congregation. Margarita here in the center is the representative from ICAME, or the Quito Mennonite Church. And Fabian here is a representative of IEME, which is the Indigenous Evangelical Mennonite Church that was planted. There are 9 churches, or maybe 10, that were planted by Rosedale Mennonite missions back in the early 80s. And so they've been expanding. These 4 groups, or this foursome, were signing an accord or an agreement to start the work for an Anabaptist Mennonite Biblical Institute. So they are planning on moving forward to create an Anabaptist institution where leaders from across those conferences can be trained as pastors, as leaders. So this was really, I mean, they've been working on this literally for like 20 years. And even I'll share that even during this time, there were some disagreements and concerns about, well, how is this all going to work? You know, we're not the same. We have different ideas of who should be a leader and what leadership should look like. But what they worked at, and I think was helpful, was they said one of the examples was to talk about the Schleitheim Confession. If you've heard of the Schleitheim Confession, right? That was the first confession of faith that the early Anabaptists put together. And in that confession, there are 7 sort of values that are held together. And what they talked about was like, okay, so there's 7 things that brought that group of people together. Well, there might have been thousands upon thousands of things that they disagreed about, but those were the 7 things that held them together. So this group worked on talking about, well, what are the things that hold us together? And they came up with 4 or 5, and they said, these are what are going to hold us at our center, and we'll work out the details later, but we're going to move forward together because we see the value in Anabaptist education. And so that was a really important thing. The other really exciting movement that they are doing and working on together is they call it the pacificadores, which are the peacemakers, and they do these workshops across the country with folks, young people, pastor leaders, and they train on peacemaking. And this is incredibly important during this time. Some of you are aware of the violence that has started to happen in Ecuador. 2 years ago, the presidential candidate was assassinated not too far from where Peter and Delicia live because of his stance towards organized crime and drug trafficking. Since Colombia has signed a peace accord with between the government and the guerrilla organization FARC, a lot of the drug trafficking has moved to Ecuador and has caused a lot of violence to spring up. So there are cities in the country now that really aren't safe for Ecuadorians or anybody to travel to. By and large, the country is still very safe, but they are experiencing a very significant rise in violence and crime. So much so that it was the safest country in all of Latin America just even like 5 years ago, and now it is the most violent country in Latin America. Again, in very specific pockets, just like in the US, where you would need to take precaution if you were traveling to certain places and at different times. It's not like the entire country is dangerous all the time or anything like that. I mean, we were totally safe, but it is a significant concern for the church, and specifically for the churches who are in areas where there is such violence. So they're learning what it means to be peacemakers within this violence. And on the last day, the group of us, the Ecuador Partnership Group, by this time, Christine, the boys, and Debbie and the rest had left. And so we had to celebrate with a giant meat fest that they didn't get to participate in. This was an Argentine asado or a la parrilla. So this was, really good food. But part of what we were doing is debriefing and talking about some of the what we had heard, what we had learned, and how we might support the ongoing ministries in Ecuador. Diego here, he also shared with us about Venezuela. Venezuela is also part of the Ecuador Partnership. We have not been able to travel to Venezuela since the upheaval and changes. You can't get a visa right now from the U.S. to go to Venezuela. You can technically in Canada, but Nathan has been unable to. Those offices are closed right now. They're not serving. So we're trying to figure out how to support the Venezuelan churches. But Diego went last this last year and gave us a report as well. So overall, there's a lot of movement, energy. Some of the things that you know these churches and conferences are asking themselves are things that we at Central Plains are asking ourselves. How do you relate to one another when you don't have all things held in common, where we don't hold all the same theology? We have things at our center that hold us together. But what does it mean when we disagree? And they disagree sometimes, and yet they're finding ways to work together. So it was a good experience, and we're grateful. Well, I'm speaking a lot, but grateful for the support that East Union demonstrated for sending us as a group. I want to encourage you all to consider next year if you would be interested in traveling. So I think we'll open it up to questions at this time, and any of us can answer. Maybe Lucas needs to answer. No.
I have a question for Lucas and I.
Okay, question for Lucas and Isaac.
It's very important. Could they comment on the chicken foot soup?
Oh, would you comment on the chicken foot soup?
It was all right. It was interesting. The feet.
Well, I didn't have time to eat it. We were leaving the church service pretty quickly, and so I left my soup on the step outside the church for the local dogs.
So the soup, that was an interesting morning because we go to the service, the church service, not knowing what to expect. We're thinking, okay, hour and a half, 2 hours. We know that we're going to be asked to probably get on stage to sing a song. Well, this is 4 hours into the service at 2 o'clock, and we're like thinking our bus is supposed to pick us up, you know, at 2 o'clock, and by 2:30, like we're still there. But the soup, so the food was interesting. The soup was a chicken stock base with mote. I don't know, mote. It's a fermented field corn, white corn, big kernel. You can find them at the Mexican groceries. Really good. And then it has parsley or cilantro, and then some other spices along with it. I was lucky enough in my bowl to get gizzards, so that was a win. But yeah, not so. But it was just getting outside the comfort zone too of what to eat. A lot of plantains, tostones, pork, chicken, beef, and then rice, lentils, and starches, yucca, and fruit in the morning. The access to good, incredibly good fresh fruit is eye-opening in that belt because it's on the equator, but we weren't hot. It was like 60 degrees, 60 to 65, 68 degrees. But the amount of fruit, every morning you started out with a plate of papaya, mango, pineapple, grapes, and jugo de guanaba or blackberry or black raspberry, and just yogurt. And you set yourself up for a really good day that way. But yeah, it's just getting outside of your comfort zone a little bit and enjoying the experience for what it is. One thing with the church service that I'm just going to ramble here a little bit, but the new hymnal that came out, Bradley caught, a lot of the songs that are different for us that are, outside of what we're normally expecting in hymns. But Bradley Kaufman told me, and it's something that stuck with me, is that the Mennonite church is not, you're in the Mennonite church, you know what we have here in southeastern Iowa, but if you look at the global Mennonite church, it is much different than what we experience here. This was a reminder that is the case, and that the form of worship, the style of singing, the style of praise is different. And so there's just immersing yourself in that was eye-opening. And that's something that I really take away from the experience. Also, at one of the church services on Sunday morning, the minister would give the message and the congregants would ask questions and there would be interaction. It'd be sort of like an open Bible study where you take the scripture in Ephesians and everybody, they would talk about what that meant to them or question them. And so it was a learning experience. And I don't know if Joel's ready for that experience, but maybe someday. And then just the singing on the indigenous services was different, loud.
Well, so we were all kind of struck because that first Sunday we went to this outdoor, in the backyard service, and it was informal, and they were having conversations throughout the sermon. And then we went to a more traditional indigenous service, and when we say loud, that it doesn't quite do it justice. And the funny thing was that Peter said they actually had scaled it down quite a bit, that it was a lot quieter than it used to be. But we were just, it was a very unique experience there. But also cool. We stepped outside of the church, and you can see that was the first time that Chimborazo was visible, this mountain in Riobamba. And for perspective, it is the highest point on the planet, even higher than Mount Everest. It's not as tall as Mount Everest, but because of the equatorial bulge, because the Earth is not technically round, it bulges along the equator. It is the highest. It's the furthest point from the center of the Earth. I think it sticks up the most. So that was kind of cool for us to kind of take in as well.
Could you have the two boys give us sort of a feeling of what their experience was?
I'd like to piggyback on that. What do they have to say to their fellow friends in their generation regarding the value of this trip and what you have learned, and what has it sunk in a little bit that might be your goal to do?
So just to repeat the questions, that wanting the perspective of Isaac and Lucas, their experience with this trip highlights, but then also if they would have suggestions for other people their age or from their peers, like what's the value in going on a trip like this, and does it make you think of anything in the future?
I thought the overall trip was really good, and it was a good experience for me. And I learned a lot and experienced a lot. And yeah, I don't really.
Sounds like a answer.
Well, I would say that I didn't really know what it meant to be outside of your comfort zone until this trip. Because getting back to Iowa, one of the first things I did was go for a run, and I'm feel perfectly comfortable just running down a sidewalk in Kelowna. And it kind of made me think about how I didn't have that kind of comfort in Ecuador, and being exposed to that discomfort, and then still learning about how people in Ecuador and other places will feel the same at home as I do in Iowa in a different setting is I really enjoyed discovering that.
How many people remember when HCJB from Quito, Ecuador was on the radio?
I forgot to ask that question, but yeah. So Dale was sharing with me before we went down that as kids, he listened to the radio station HCJB from
Christ Jesus blessings.
Heralding Christ blessings, from Quito, Ecuador. That it was a radio program that I guess maybe, did you also hear it, Loretta? Or?
My Ecuador connections go way back. My father had two, they were actually his stepbrothers, and they became missionaries.
Okay, I'm sorry. Okay, my Ecuador connection. Way back, my father had two the stepbrothers, and a stepsister, and they all became missionaries in Colombia and Ecuador. So I remember the letters that were written, but my mother was a letter writer, and then they would come home on furlough and show slides and all of that. And actually, my uncle John and Aunt Mary, I think that was her name. Anyway, they were actually killed in a plane crash in Colombia. And so they're buried on a mountaintop in Colombia. They were missionaries with the Mennonite Brethren Board of Missions. And then my uncle Abe and Aunt Emma, and my Aunt Helen, she was single. They were missionaries in Quito. So the HCJB was kind of a missionary thing. And so, yeah, Ecuador is not as strange to me. And then our daughter Kathleen spent a year with SALT in Ecuador, in Quito. So yeah.
I just wanted to add to Isaac and Lucas and getting out of comfort zone, and particularly Sarah shared this morning about the SALT opportunities, but particularly Ethan, Greg and Sarah's Ethan is going to Guatemala. So he's going to be out of his comfort zone and learning lots of new things. And really, Audrey Miller is going to Kentucky along with Chris, but that's, crossing state lines, Arkansas, and that's going to be a new experience too. So we can particularly think of those two this week.
So I have a question. What are you doing for SALT? Lucas? Middle school, okay. You're not.
For SALT, we're just like making bags out of plastic stuff. I don't know. Just craft and stuff.
Yeah, I'm doing what they're calling spirituality of soccer. So it's we're gonna like start off the day with pretty much soccer practice, and then we'll do different things. I think we're gonna do a lot at the university with I think we're doing a challenge course and then we're gonna meet with like a nutritionist and maybe a psychologist or sports psychologist, and then also I think we're working with drones and AI and that type of thing. So kind of a range of stuff.
Yeah, actually Kyle Miller from here is gonna help with the drones on maybe tomorrow, I think, so. Any other questions about the Ecuador trip?
The soccer, when you speak about soccer, we learned a lot about soccer from the Lucians and the Beachy boys. A lot. And the one neat thing in Riobamba, that picture with the soccer stadium or soccer field, the little mini soccer field in concrete, it was like a half a block from our hotel. But they have these fields, these courts scattered throughout a lot of the cities and a lot of the countryside. You see, oh, there's a little mini one. Oh, there's a little. But it's a great gathering point for people and kids in the community. And it was also, we played with and against the folks from Riobamba Church. But it was a great coming together. I mean, because we were just playing. We were just having to let our guards down. The language barrier didn't matter at all. And it was just enjoyable. And I thought that was one of my favorite moments of the trip. We played 3 times. We won the first one, 11-9. They won the second one, 13-11. And then we tied 4-4 forever. So until the next time we go. But we tied because it is a concrete court. And one of the Lucian boys, Kieran, fell and hit his head it was raining and so it was slick. And he hit his head and he had to go to the hospital for 6 stitches. And so he's like, yeah, everybody was concerned, but it all turned out all right.
But he was excited for the scar, so it was all good. Any other questions or? Again, just encourage you to think about possibility of doing joining a trip like this in the future. Yeah, it's always a good experience, and there's lots of. For me personally, I think there's a lot that we can learn from our brothers and sisters from the global South. You know, as Verna mentioned and Dale mentioned, like there have been these missionaries. There have been typically we have sent people to South America, Asia, and Africa, and so on to plant churches and spread the gospel message. But there's a lot now that we can learn and receive from what they are doing there, and so I encourage you to take a look. Thank you.
We do have a chicken foot story.
Chicken's foot story.
That was not uncommon. To put the chicken foot, in with the bones. Cause my mother never did it, but I remember my grandmother. And for us kids talking about it, how gross that was.